Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report, a unique look at the business of sports, brought to you by Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano, and I'm here to coach you through the financial game. Today, we've got Yahoo Sports senior writer Jordan Shusterman coming on the show to discuss the latest coming out of MLB, as well as Washington University in St. Louis's Sports Business Program Executive Director and Sports Impact Founder and CEO, Patrick Rishe, to break down some of the latest headlines. Let's huddle up and get right into it. We are kicking off this week with Pomp's Playbook, where I take a look at some of the biggest headlines in sports that you and your portfolio need to know. First up, WNBA players made a bold statement at last week's All-Star Game amid ongoing collective bargaining negotiations between the league and the WNBA Players Association. During warm-ups of last Saturday's WNBA All-Star Game, players entered the court wearing shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us," as a negotiation tactic for CBA talks. The shirts, of course, went viral across social media and sparked a discussion around fair pay for the W's players, as well as the league continues to explode in popularity and expands its number of teams. Now, there is still plenty of time for the WNBA and the Players Association to strike a deal before the current CBA expires on October 31st. However, it's evident that both sides of the negotiation table are far apart, and the players have said that they're willing to enter a work stoppage as a last resort. But one thing is clear. Negotiations have officially entered the court of public opinion, and these next few months will define the WNBA for the next decade. Next up, President Donald Trump wants the Washington Commanders to change their name back to the former Redskins moniker, and he's threatening to pull the franchise's new stadium deal in Washington, D.C. if the change isn't made. Trump posted to his True Social account on Sunday saying, quote, "The Washington whatevers should immediately change their name back to the Washington Redskins football team," end quote. Then, a few hours later, Trump doubled down on his statement and posted again to True Social, saying that he won't make a deal for the team to build their new $3.8 billion stadium in D.C. unless the change is done. However, it is unclear if there's any way for Trump to derail the Commanders' plan to build a new dome stadium at the former RFK site, as Congress gave full control of the RFK land to the city of Washington, D.C. last December, before the control was officially signed into law by former President Joe Biden in January. In the meantime, the Commanders are seeking approval from the D.C. City Council for the multi-billion-dollar stadium project, which includes over $1 billion in public funding. Last up, Fox Sports has signed a massive agreement with Barstool Sports to feature Barstool shows and personalities on its sports programming. According to multiple reports, Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy will become a regular commentator on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff football show starting this fall. As part of the deal, the Barstool College football show will also air before Big Noon Kickoff on Fox Sports' digital platforms and Tubi. And Portnoy and other Barstool personalities like Dan, Big Cat Katz, will be part of a new 2-hour studio show produced by Barstool that will air on the FS1 channel before the network's popular midday show, The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Now, this move comes after Fox canceled its 2 FS1 morning shows, Breakfast Fall and The Facility, as well as one of its afternoon shows, Speak, early last week due to low ratings. However, Fox is now betting that Barstool could help as FS1's morning programming and Big Noon Kickoff show better compete against ESPN fixtures like Get Up, First Take, and College Game Day. This week's money shakeups continue, but this time on the baseball field. The Tampa Bay Rays are changing ownership in a deal that could reshape the franchise's financial future. Here to help break it all down is Yahoo Sports senior writer Jordan Shusterman. Jordan, thank you so much for joining the show today. I want to start with exactly that, which is the Tampa Bay Rays sale, $1.7 billion to a Jacksonville developer. The team is reportedly going to be staying in Tampa Bay, but we had a stadium deal over the last number of years. Obviously, they're playing in the minor league stadium now. What do you think about just the sale in general and what it means for the future of Tampa Bay's Rays team?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important story that goes really beyond St. Petersburg and Tampa Bay, just because, Rob Manfred, as he kind of heads towards the commissioner, as he heads towards kind of the end of his tenure at the top Major League Baseball, expansion is a major priority for him. And a big part of that has been settling the stadium and kind of ownership situations with both the A's, as we know they are very slowly moving towards Las Vegas, and then also the Rays, who have, of course, had a lot of upheaval, some of which under their control, some of which, out of their control because of what happened with the hurricane and the damage done to Tropicana Field, their home, where they're unable to play this year. So this is an important, of course, bit of news for the franchise itself, but it is also, in the big picture, a very big goal for the league office.
Yep. Speaking of Rob Manfred, he was at the All-Star game, of course, and he did a media session where he touched on a bunch of different things between different interviews, everything from ending blackouts to media rights negotiations to essentially saying that the MLB hasn't done a good enough job working with content creators over the years, like some other sports leagues have done. Now, what did you just take of his kind of appearance in general? And I preface all of this with after all of that, I think it was Alex Rodriguez said that he belongs in Cooperstown. So there obviously claims to be, differing opinions on whether people think he's doing a good job or a poor job. But what is your just kind of 30,000-foot view on how good of a job he's doing, if it is a good job, and then some of the comments that he said specifically during the weekend?
Yeah, I think, some of the stuff that A-Rod was referring to, I mean, a lot has changed in Major League Baseball over the last half decade. And also, again, some out of necessity and some out of just very big, bold decisions, changing how the game is played with stuff like the pitch clock, with soon to be, the ABS challenge system with balls and strikes. So this commissioner has changed so much about the sport. And a lot of these have been rousing successes. And I think attendance and ratings do say that. But the media landscape is a totally other different discussion. And that's something that is very, I mean, I'm less well versed in the exact numbers and financials of those as maybe someone like you are. But I do know that these are also big decisions that are going to shape what the sport looks like and what the financials are for owners who, for a long time, were relying, on local TV, local sports revenue, TV revenue that is not necessarily the same because of how these rights are being split up. And so that is going to determine, I think, kind of the spending power for some of these markets. Some of these markets are completely impervious to this because they have these massive TV deals, and other smaller ones, this is going to make a big difference on the kinds of money that they're going to be bringing in via TV revenue over the next few years. So these are big decisions that the league clearly has to make.
Yeah, during the CBA negotiations, there's been a lot of talk about salary cap, salary floors, implementing some system that looks more like the NFL, NBA, et cetera. Do you think we'll ever get there? There's an argument, right, that the players obviously don't want it because they can get as big of salaries as they can command right now, but they also sometimes, depending on the math and the year, sometimes share in a smaller percentage of total revenue than some of the other sports leagues do. So what is your feeling around kind of what ends up happening there?
Yeah, I mean, that is the ultimate question as we head towards these new CBA negotiations is, the players, I think, especially baseball in this union that has managed to avoid a salary cap for so long. I think that really is the number one non-starter. I think a lot of fans want to see a salary floor to get some of those smaller market teams to be a little bit more competitive. Now, we're always going to have imbalance in baseball, and that is always going to be a reality of this, no matter what exact financial structure is put in, because of just how disparate the spending, not just the spending power, but the spending willingness. I mean, this is the other thing. We do see teams spend when they want to. A lot of these teams are more capable than they're actually showing off. And so maybe they aren't all capable of spending like the Mets and the Dodgers, but we know that they have a lot more money that they are spending than what we have seen. And so I think that is the crux of the issue, is players believe that teams can spend to be more competitive. And the owners, who of course Rob Manfred is explicitly working for, they're trying to find ways to keep spending down and to, in theory, level the playing field, when ultimately they're just finding ways to spend less to remain more competitive. And so that is a very difficult issue. This is, of course, going to be the headlining of the CBA negotiations upcoming after next season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, if you put in a salary cap, you got to have a floor. It just makes more sense. But the owners obviously want to keep costs down as much as they can. But Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it.
We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, we've got Washington University in St. Louis's Sports Business Program Executive Director, Patrick Rishe, joining the show. Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Sports Report. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. We've made it to One-on-One, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. This week, we're speaking with Patrick Rishe, Executive Director of the Sports Business Program at Washington University in St. Louis, and founder and CEO of Sports Impact. Patrick, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, I want to talk about a few different topics and a few different sports, but I think the most logical place to start with is the WNBA. I think everyone saw last weekend the players protesting during the middle of their CBA negotiations, wearing shirts that basically said, "Go pay us what we're worth." Now, you've probably, I assume, looked at this economic model for a long period of time as the league has grown with Caitlin Clark entering the league. What can you tell us about some of the challenges or what we might eventually see during the CBA negotiation?
Well, it is challenging and it's also interesting. And the fact that if you look at the history of collective negotiations in all these other leagues, I think there are lessons to be learned from that as well. The players currently in the WNBA are earning roughly 9 or 10% of the revenue generated from the league. So you look at that in comparison to all the other more established leagues, and you say, well, that's almost criminal, because most of these leagues have now reached, I guess you could call, a steady state where the players and the owners are sharing 50% of league revenues. So I think that's a place where we eventually are likely to see this end up. Now, whether that gets there in this particular round of negotiations or in the next CBA is, remains to be seen. I think my biggest concern as it relates to the growth of the WNBA is making sure that we're growing at a rate that is sustainable. You're bringing in these expansion franchises. I believe the last round of expansion with Cleveland, with Detroit, with Philadelphia, each franchise, they're paying $250 million. Part of the benefit of that for the other league owners is that money is now shared. Those expansion fees are now shared across the league, buttressing some of the annual losses that the league has sustained, operating losses over the years. Sustainable growth. I think that's the key. Now, the other thing that you've got, Joe, is huge jump in media revenue, where the league starting next year is going to be making, I believe it's $200 million per year, which is 4 times larger than where they've been. That obviously is going to help from an operating profits perspective for all the teams. So very fascinating. I don't know if they're going to get to a 50-50 split on this particular round of negotiations, but I do anticipate that the players will, at minimum, probably get up to 40% share of league revenues after this round of negotiations.
Very interesting. I want to change gears here for a second and roll over to the House versus NCAA settlement. I mean, this was a groundbreaking moment in sports history and certainly collegiate sports history, where through the House versus NCAA settlement, there's now going to be essentially this revenue sharing program with the schools and their athletes. Schools are going to be able to spend up to $20.5 million starting this year on their student athletes. They're going to be able to sign contracts, all of that stuff. There's also going to be a clearinghouse that's going to kind of monitor all the existing and future NIL deals to make sure that they're actually NIL. So theoretically, we should see, some of these collectives take a step back and more traditional NIL with revenue share mixed in. Now, that is to be determined what that looks like, but I'd love to get your opinion on just sort of the rollout, what that might look like, and sort of where we go from here.
The lawyers are licking their chops. Look, I think there should be a clearinghouse. And I do like the fact that there is more, kind of monitoring the types of engagements that are taking place and the partnerships that are being done. Initially, when we opened this era of name, image, and likeness, the part of the perspective was players have to do deals where they're actually receiving and providing services in return for the resources that they're being given. I think we got away from that and we got back to kind of this old school under the table. Collectives were a creative way of getting around more traditional sponsorships and endorsement deals just to find ways to give talented kids money. I really hope that we can kind of rein that in a bit. However, I think that the House settlement obviously is changing and professionalizing collegiate sports in a way that we've never seen in the past. I do think that some of these schools where football is their main sport, they're going to have to make some very interesting resource allocation decisions, right? Because most of that money, reports that I'm reading, of 20.5 million, 16, 17 million of that may be spent on football. So now the non-football schools may have the opportunity to be a little bit more competitive in, let's say, men's and women's basketball, because they can allocate those resources more so to those particular revenue drivers for their school. Joe, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. As I led off, there are going to be some legal challenges because lawyers typically, with respect to student athlete rights, they want to give their athletes freedom to be able to choose and earn as they wish. So I think it's going to be still a degree of wild, wild west, and we'll see if the government is going to step in and create some kind of national legislation. I think that's going to be more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, to your point, it's going to be interesting to see when that first school sort of goes over that bumper and tries to navigate the rules in a different manner and what that punishment is, because I think that's going to be sort of a watershed moment for the industry as a whole to really see what the punishment is. But time will tell, probably in the next couple of years here, if I had to imagine. But Patrick, you recently released a study, an economic study on the 2025 NFL draft in Green Bay. And I want to dig into this a little bit if we can, because these events are really interesting from a finance perspective, because everyone looks at events and they say, oh, it brings this huge economic impact. And sometimes maybe that's true. A lot of times it's probably not. But Green Bay is sort of a unique area where they weren't going to be able to get a Super Bowl. They built out this Titletown district, basically an entertainment district around the stadium. So then they were given the NFL draft. Now, this is still a big event in a small market. Tell me a little bit about what you were able to determine through this study.
Sure. The NFL draft is interesting. And yes, you're bringing in a lot of fans. Now, granted, you're bringing in a lot of, let's say, regional fans or fans from bordering states. Unlike, let's say, the College World Series in Omaha, where you truly are getting people from all over the country and it's a higher percentage. For the NFL draft, and I've done the study now the last couple of years, last year in Detroit, this year in Green Bay, you are still getting a lot of non-locals, people that are not from the immediate, let's say, counties that surround the host city, but it tends to be more regional in the sense that maybe you'll get people from other parts of the state, Milwaukee, Madison, and then bordering states like Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, and the like. But they're coming in, regardless of how far away they're coming. They are coming in, they're spending money at hotels, and they're also getting a chance to kind of, in some cases, experiencing Green Bay for the first time. And that could lead to future tourism. It's always fascinating when you're doing the survey research as we do on site, and then you just have these anecdotal conversations with people. Man, I've never been up here before. I look forward to coming back at some point, whether it's for a Packers game or, oh, wow, this Titletown was amazing. I'd love to come back here when there's not a football game. So it's that kind of anecdotal feedback that shows you, yeah, there's a lot of value that these communities receive from hosting these events. And it also builds up a profile. So it serves as a great marketing pitch for the community.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And we saw it in Detroit and we certainly saw it in Green Bay as well. Switching gears to FIFA. FIFA did the Club World Cup this past this summer, and we're going to be hosting the World Cup across North America next year. What was your general feedback on sort of how the Club World Cup was run? And what do you think that says for the future with the World Cup coming next year?
Well, I think we need to understand they got a lot of bad press because a lot of the matches were not well attended. And people have to understand, I think part of the whole reason why this was put on was it was a dry run for next year's World Cup in terms of logistics. And yes, maybe you can't gauge the logistics of how you're going to operationally run a World Cup match when you have only half the audience that you're going to have next summer, but it's still a dry run to ensure that, okay, when we host the World Cup in 2026, what are the things operationally, logistically on site we need to think of day of, security, entry flow, all these logistical operational issues that you just have to think about when you are running an event at a particular property. So I think that's the main takeaway from the Club World Cup is, it's hard to it's apples to oranges in terms of the magnitude and the crowd sizes and so forth. But I think at least hosting this, you at least had a initial sense and a feel for what groups, when I say groups, venue and property owners are going to have to do to run those events at SoFi, in Miami, in Kansas City at GHA Field, all these places that are hosting World Cup matches next summer.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd like to talk about is just kind of overall the sports industry and where things head over the next few years. As someone who looks a lot at virtually every sports league, I imagine, and certainly the ones here in North America, are there any specific sports leagues that stand out to you, maybe one or two of them that you think are poised for growth over the next couple of years?
There's been so much focus on the WNBA and NWSL, and of course, of the women's professional sports leagues. Those are the leagues that, arguably carry the most gravitas and most attention for a variety of reasons. But I think that when it comes to the Love Volleyball League as well as women's softball, women's sports generally, as we all know, has really picked up momentum in the last several years for a variety of reasons. More love from media, more love from corporate partners, and those two kind of flow together. But I actually think that women's softball is going to be a growth sport, because if you look at the Women's College World Series, always the ratings continue to grow. The attendance is usually sold out there in Oklahoma City. But I think that's an area where, the games are faster, the action is fast, and that and volleyball, I think those are two areas that are going to see more growth, more expansion, as more people want to get into the ownership of pro sports, but are priced out. It used to be that people would get into the NWSL and the WNBA because they were priced out of being in the NBA or in the NFL. Well, guess what? Those franchise values have increased so rapidly in women's basketball and women's soccer that now the next tier of ownership could be those sports, volleyball and softball. And quite frankly, again, we've seen the ratings, the college level have grown. So I do think this is a growth opportunity for many markets and also many people that want to invest in women's sports.
Very interesting. I love those two picks with softball and volleyball. But thanks so much for joining us, Patrick. I had a great time talking to you.
Thanks, Joe.
The clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buds. So let's talk about Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg famously keeps his mind on his money and his money on his mile. And now he's putting some of that money toward a new ownership stake in Welsh soccer club Swansea City. Last week, Swansea City confirmed that the American rapper is joining its ownership group as a co-owner and investor, but financial terms were not disclosed. The 53-year-old will join an all-American ownership group led by Andy Coleman, Brett Kravitz, and Jason Cohen, who collectively own the club through Swansea Football LLC. Snoop Dogg said in a statement released by the team, quote, "The story of the club in the area really struck a chord with me. This is a proud, working-class city and club, an underdog that bites back, just like me," end quote. Snoop also helped Swansea City launch its 2025-26 jersey kit a few days before the official announcement by wearing its home shirt in a social media post from the club. Now, Swansea City competes in the EFL Championship, which is the second tier of the English Football League behind the top-flight Premier League. The club last played in the Premier League in the 2017-2018 season before being relegated to the Championship, where the team has played for the last 7 seasons. But this coming season, Snoop Dogg will have fellow American celebrity owners to compete against. Wrexham A.F.C., the now famous Welsh club owned by actors Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, were promoted to the EFL Championship after finishing second in the third-tier EFL League One last season. Snoop and Swansea City will also battle against 7-time Super Bowl champion quarterback Tom Brady, who is a minority investor in Birmingham City, which secured promotion to the championship with Wrexham after winning League One in 2025. Now, it's time to see if Snoop Dogg, McElhenney, Reynolds, and Brady can have their soccer investments pay off big by securing promotion to the Premier League. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Jordan, Patrick, and all of you for joining us. Please make sure to scan the QR code below to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insight. And catch us every Friday wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. See you next time.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.